سلام دوستان عزیز، خیلی خوشحالم که به لایو ما پیوستید. کریس جکسون هم احتمالاً توی چند دقیقه دیگه به ما اضافه میشه و من ادش میکنم دیگه. خب از زمانی هم که ادش بکنم این مکالمات به انگلیسی خواهد بود. چند دقیقه منتظرش میمونیم. لایو امروز خب یه مقدار زیادی راجع به مباحث آینده پژوهیه، یه مقداری راجع به حالا تلاقی آینده پژوهی و طراحیه، اینکه این در واقع رشته ها چجوری با هم دیگه کار میکنن و حالا در واقع حالا تمرین معاصرترش که توی چند سال اخیر داره اتفاق میفته در جای مختلف دنیا به چه شکله، حالا چالش هایی که کریس باشون مواجهه توی نیوزیلند، این چالش ها چه شباهت هایی به چالش هایی داره که ما توی ایران داریم، چه تفاوت هایی داره. من حالا بازم منتظر کریس هستم، امیدوارم که بهم اضافه بشه. من تشکر میکنم که دارید جوین میشید به این مرسی. خب حالا تا کریس رو داشته باشیم من میرم یه خورده میپردازم به اینکه چه چیزایی رو صحبت خواهیم کرد. برای شما زیرنویس به صورت زنده البته پخش خواهد شد، همکاران من براتون آماده میکنن تا جایی که حالا ممکن باشه برای اونها براتون زیرنویس اضافه میکنن. حالا بعد از معرفی ها و اینها خب یه تفاوتایی در واقع افرادی که کار آینده پژوهی انجام میدن یا حداقل آشنان باهاش یا مطالعه دارن توی اون حوزه، یه تفاوتی همیشه بین the future و futures قائلن. یعنی زمانی که یه اس برای جمع بستن اضافه میکنن به داستان، این معنا یعنی طوری عوض میشه که یک نقطه کلیدی در دانش آینده پژوهیه و این برای ما همیشه خیلی مهمه. خب کریس به ما اضافه شد، من کریس رو جوین میکنم. Hi Chris.
How's it going?
It's going amazing. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Okay.
I can hear you loud and clear. Amazing.
Just having some technical difficulties.
No problem. Not at all. Yeah.
Salam alaikum.
How's everything with you? Oh, salam alaikum. Salam alaikum, Chris. So we have some technical difficulties. I guess his network is not responding well.
We're back. Sorry, we just dropped out. Assalamu alaikum.
No Salam, Chris.
Okay.
How are you
Should
doing?
be good now. Good, thank
How's
you.
everything in New Zealand? Good evening.
It's good. It's good. Wait, it's like it's pitch black.
Yeah, pitch black. So thank you so much for joining us this late because I guess it's
no
10:30 there. It's 10:30 in Wellington and you're there. Thank you so much. It's my honor. Thank you so much for joining us here today to talk a little bit about different issues, and that'll be a very interesting conversation, I guess. I would just start introducing you to our audience. So you have worked for 18 years in different sections of the design discipline, the different disciplines of design. You did some industrial design, furniture design. You worked on service design, strategic design. You did so many different things. And you started your work in the UK, and then you moved to New Zealand, as far as I know. And you're now the founder of We Create Futures in Wellington.
Yeah.
You started the firm from 2018, if I'm not wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And now you're working on multiple projects, design and research and everything. But what is very interesting for me is that you, when you selected the name, you selected the word futures. And you and I and everybody who knows futures studies, they're more familiar with the distinction between futures and the future. And I always open my own workshops with that. What is the difference? I've heard you so many times in your talks talking about, so what is the difference between future of work and when we say the futures? I want you to open up on this and give us your own perspective on how you distinguish between these two words that represent different concepts.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's super cool to be speaking to people in Tehran and in the Middle East. So thanks for the opportunity, Pouyan. So yeah, thinking about the future, and it's interesting that suddenly everyone's thinking about the future. You know, in the current situation that we're in the pandemic that's spread all over the world, and people are experiencing that in different ways. Lots of people are talking about the future and what sort of future we're going to have and what it's going to be like in different places. And already the present is very different depending on what part of the world that you're actually in, experiencing this pandemic at the moment. So yeah, when we talk about the futures or speculative foresight practitioners or futures practitioners talk about plurality of possibility, basically. So the future is not one thing. It's not one place that we're all going to. There's many different possible futures, and there's really obvious ways that you can talk to that. You can talk about, you know, well, what if Hillary Clinton was elected over President Trump? You'd have seen a very different sort of future than we have now. And like today, you know, the president of the United States talking about injecting people with disinfectant to sort of get rid of coronavirus is one very particular type of future that we've got at the moment, which is just very interesting. So yeah, this idea that the future is plural and the decisions that we make in the present start to shape that future. So I was thinking about this the other day, and it's almost like we have 8 billion dreams of what the future might be, and there's infinite possibility of how that might happen. So yeah, it's quite hard to talk to people that we talk a lot in our practice about people's minds being colonized by certain ideas, and this idea that there's been one future that we're all heading to, and we're all on this trajectory to this one place, whereas actually there's this plurality of lots and lots of different futures. And also that depends on, you know, your culture and where you've been brought up and the perspective that you bring to that. So I think one of the challenges of futures practice, like many types of innovation practices, they're very Western orientated. So they've come out of a Western school of thinking. You know, they can be quite imperialistic in terms of how they view the world, and they come out of Silicon Valley or the UK or Scandinavia. We've always had these sort of innovation practices that are very Eurocentric. They're Western white Eurocentric. And you know, here in New Zealand, Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand, Maori, don't see the future as past, present, and future. They see the future as intertwined, and it's not chronological. So
interesting.
For those people, for indigenous people within New Zealand, their ancestors are always with them. They're not something that they leave behind in the past. Their ancestors are ever present in terms of what they do, and the future is intertwined with the past, which is a very different way of thinking about the future, and it just speaks to that idea that not only is there a plurality of futures, but there's a plurality of thinking about what the future is and how we relate to it.
Yeah, that was a very interesting perspective you gave us about Maori people, that they don't really conceive time like we do, like Western oriented world understands time. That was a very interesting thing. And so, okay, so you started your practice and you started to kind of mixing those ideas and those concepts together with like innovation, using all these things, all of your experience. How was that experience? How was that for you, like in the personal level?
I think design. So my practice comes out of a design practice, like you said, Pouyan, before that. I did a degree, like I did a honors degree in furniture and product design, and then I did a master's degree in furniture design, and my practice has always developed out of that. And like you were saying before, I've been a lecturer, so I've been an academic, I've been a public servant, I've worked in a design agency, I've run my own business, I've done a lot of different things that not a lot of people do, which you can put your own judgment on whether I'm good at anything, and I just have to move around because I'm not very good at stuff.
My judgment is that you're actually good at, well, I mean, all
thank
of the
you.
things that you did. Yeah, of course.
Very kind. So design is inherently interested with creating the future. So, you know, designers look to solve problems, or they look in that sort of Herb Simon definition of what design is, taking transforming a current situation to a preferred situation. They're always interested in how can we envision something new and then create something that no one else can see, whether that be a prototype, like a thing, a website, a service, graphic design, signage, whatever that might be. But I think the key part of that is that they're always interested in solving problems, and the timelines that they often work on are sort of 6 month to 3 year timelines of, you know, product development processes or creating really big websites, like government websites, whatever that might be. Whereas the futures and foresight space works on timelines that are further out. So generally, minimally 10 years you work out, and then like 10, 20, 30 years, you know, and what you're interested in is you're interested in about posing questions, not answering them. So you're interested in asking people, what if this thing happened over here? What if the consequences of something now turned into this big wave of stuff? How would we change? What would our values be like? How would we innovate? What would we live like? And it's less concerned with solving problems rather than asking questions. So I think for me that stepping point out from being sort of quite short term, when you work in strategy for a long time, you're always thinking about what's strategic, what's the plan, how can we create something that other people can get excited about, and how do we turn that into action. But then I also think then you start thinking about these bigger contexts that you might be working in. And especially at the moment, what we see, or certainly what we see as a practice, is a real lack of creativity in terms of thinking about what the future may be. So even though a lot of people are talking about the future at the moment, because everyone's saying, well, what's the future going to be like? Is it going to be like, will we travel anymore? Will we need, you know, COVID? Will we have a COVID-19 vaccine? Like, will that even happen? What happens if it doesn't happen? And everyone's been quite analytical about what that might look like, but they're also thinking in ways that they used to think pre-COVID-19. So they're trying to apply the same tools and methods that happened before into a world now where we can't think like that anymore, and we have to be more creative and more exploratory. And that's something we're really excited about at the moment as a team and as a practice and collaborators, is how do we start to really break open people's minds, to stop being colonized by that pre-COVID world, to really think about, well, you thought none of this stuff could happen. You didn't think your airlines could, you know, sort of collapse. Just before, in January, there's a place in New Zealand called Queenstown, and it's on the South Island, and it's a big tourist destination. We have a client there, big tourist destination, and there's like bungee jumping was started there. So AJ Hackett started bungee jumping there, and it's there's skiing and snowboarding, and it's got world-class snowboarding parks, and it survives on tourism. And in 4 weeks, Queenstown's gone from one of the richest places in New Zealand to one of the poorest. And if you had told people that would happen before Christmas, they wouldn't believe you.
Yeah, they could not even imagine it, probably.
No.
Yeah.
So really taking this opportunity to, you know, without being too mercenary about, like, you don't want to be perceived like you're trying to take advantage of this situation, but at the same time, our job as a practice is to help people think about this stuff, yeah? So we're not just changing what we do, we're just trying to go, well, there's ways to think about these things that you think are a surprise, or, you know, you haven't seen them come in, or whatever it might be, but what does this mean now for the future? So I think a really good example of this is the future of work. So for a long time, people have been talking about the future of work as co-working spaces and people working from home and people using technology and not going into the office and all this stuff. And suddenly we're in that future. We're in that future quite quickly. And yet people aren't talking about what's the future of work. They're almost going, oh, well, we're here. We're here at the future of work because this is all what we were talking about and it's all happening. So we're here. But it's almost like, no, this is the present of work.
Exactly.
So there's still a future.
Is still coming.
So like, what is that? Yeah. So I think it's a really exciting time for us, tempered by this, you know, this anxiety and fear and uncertainty around, well, when somewhere like New Zealand relies on tourism so much, and it relies on agriculture and other industries that you can see in terms of if you believe in climate change also are heavily affected by climate change. So we have a lot of opportunity at the moment to rethink a lot of these things and reimagine what they could be. But at the same time, there's a lot of concern around, well, how are we going to make money? How many people are going to lose their jobs? How are people going to feed their families? How, like, all these questions that in this immediate sort of space that we're in are really pressing questions and are really, really relevant for people, because it's I mean, you need to feed your family. You need to understand that if you had a career in tourism, then where's that going to go? Yeah. So a big question for us at the moment is, how do we balance that need for people to sort of shore up their, shore up cash flow and get things off the ground again, but also not lose the opportunity to really pause for a moment and take the opportunity to think really imaginatively about the future. So that's what we're trying to help people to do. Yeah.
So I want to go a little deeper. I actually like how you framed it, and you finally mentioned like how would people earn money? How would people eat? How would we have an economy? So in many of the in many of the literature concerning speculative design, that is the field that you are practicing in, they kind of like have this demarcation between those commercial things, those things that are dealing with money, and those that are not.
Yeah.
And they kind of want to have their like healthy distance to the market, as they framed it, as Don and Raby framed it, as people like Bruce Sterling probably talking about it. But I see like practices like yours are actually trying to merge these for having a real impact, for having real influence on people's lives. And of course, after all, we're living in the real world. We want to live in a world with all like prosperity, with all the I don't know, welfare. And I want you actually to address this. How do you approach this kind of duality in your work and in your practice? How do you see them?
I think it is a real challenge when you look at why speculative design was created, and obviously it's called critical design and design futures and design fiction and other things like that, and it was set up to critique what was happening within the world. And when you read the writing on that sort of distance between industry, is because lots of people took on speculative design to create nice, you know, like promotional videos or things they could use within their organization to promote what they were doing, rather than and people perceivably were fearful of clients not paying them because they were going to critique the organization or critique the industry, which you can see is challenging, but it's also a particular type of privilege that you can come from to actually say, well, you can't do that because it does these things, but we can do it where we are because we're in academia or wherever that is, so we don't have to worry about getting paid. You know, so there's always those tensions in terms of sort of methodological or philosophical purity coming from an academic space to sort of a more commercial space. There's always that challenge. I think what we try and do is we try and we sort of think of mixing design and foresight of, you know, that if you think about the futures cone, you know, we think about it as almost like places on the futures cone. So like design's quite a near future, strategies like a midterm future, foresight's like a far future. And also we think about it like that in terms of almost the funnel of, so we look at foresight to look at possibility and look at signals and whatever that might be, and create scenarios to question and critique what are our preferred futures. And then we use strategy to start to try to think of the plans to create some things that might take us in that direction. And then we use design to create the things that the tactical things potentially that help that strategy live. So whether they're like parallel experiments that you're going to run to see what emerges out of that, or they are, you know, their services or products or whatever that might be, that's how we think about that stuff. I think what we're trying to do at the moment in terms of how we're thinking about the work is we're trying to create some speculative work at the moment to act as some gravitational pull to pull people towards us in terms of hiring us to do work, because it's hard to communicate to people who aren't sort of design geeks or futures geeks or whatever it is, that it's hard to communicate what speculative design is, and it's hard to give them it's hard to explain it without showing some examples or giving them some stuff to actually see. So So at the moment we're working on some speculative futures work that we're going to put out that hopefully pulls clients towards us. Whether they employ us for that sort of work or not, I don't know. But I also think it's about doing that work's about having a good client relationship as well. So being able to have a lot of trust with your client and to be able to build a relationship where you can say to them, we're going to explore something in a way that's going to probably feel uncomfortable for you. And that's the point. And that's the opportunity to create things that don't feel comfortable because they're in the future and we don't know what that's going to be, and it could be a really uncomfortable space, but through that we create provocations and we create a dialogue that helps us think about the future in a more meaningful way. So I think having those relationships with clients can take a long time. You know, it's some people we've been working with them for 3 years before we even started the company, and they trust us. They trust what we do. They know we have high integrity, and you have to be willing to invest in those relationships to be able to gain that trust to then be able to do that sort of work. I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we always like have this double feeling about clients. So when we have clients that are actually paying us for some project, we have this like very tiny guilt that we feel that, okay, so we are moving away from what the practice actually was. But now you're kind of offering a maturing scenario for what the practice is. Probably this is how the practice is evolving itself, how it is becoming something that is actually more useful and is still more critical and challenging for most people. Is this what you're offering?
I mean, there's two things there. I think there's one of our friends and one of my clients said to me recently that there's only one problem worse than clients, and he said that's no clients. So so you're in this sort of duality where, you know, when you have clients, it can be really hard work, and some projects go really well, and then other projects are really challenging, and you know, you feel worn out and stressed by all these things that are happening. But if you don't have clients and you're a company like ours, you're not a company anymore.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that a friend of mine said, Jan Chipchase, who's a pretty well-known design ethnographer, has a practice called Studio Radio Durans, and he said in a workshop that I was in with him once, he said there's always someone above you who looks down on your practice. So there's always someone who's purer, who does it better, who's had more success, who'll look at what you do and say you don't do it as well as them. And if you always listen to those people, then you're never gonna try anything, you're never gonna do anything, and you have to accept and know what you do as an individual, as a designer, speculator, speculative designer, foresight practice, whatever it is. You know what your practice is like, and you know the work that you put into it and the influences that you have and the integrity that sits around it and all that stuff, and you have to be happy with that. And if you're happy with all you can do, yeah, there's always going to be someone who says you're not a real speculative designer, or you're not a real strategist, or you don't have this thing that you did that means you've done this thing. And you can listen to those people, or you can ignore them and you can carry on doing what you do. And I think I've always been of the mindset of, you do your best, and you do that with integrity, and you do that with honor, and you do that in the best possible way that you can. And what comes out of that comes out. And no one's going to, just like I meet people, and some people really like me and some people don't like me, You know, you've got to accept these things for what they are.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. Actually, that was very nice piece of advice, even personally for myself. I want to change a little bit the topic. I want to ask you the question actually why I thought basically I want to talk to you for these live series is that so you were talking on how New Zealand as a small country, a remote place, was challenging to your practice. People, you know, it was not established place for you to work on like speculative design. I don't know, different kinds of like futures, foresight, all of those things that we're talking about. And this is almost the same case with Iran because the country is blocked. I kind of have empathy for you. I know this empathy is very different in terms of what are those common points between New Zealand and Iran. But I want you to talk a little bit for us about your experience. How was it? How was it to establish yourself in kind of a tabula rasa of like nobody is not doing nothing, just you starting your practice?
Excuse me. I think New Zealand people are very warm and they're very, you know, when you arrive in New Zealand, people realize that you've come a long way, and wherever you're from in the world, it sort of doesn't matter where you're from, that they're very warm and they're very accommodating and they're excited that you're in New Zealand. I had, coming from London, I had ideas about, you know, just being able to start up a practice and like being able to work like I did in London, which was running my own practice, doing some teaching work, working with European manufacturers and doing trade shows like Milan Furniture Fair and the ICFF in New York, and just being able to make money. And then you come to New Zealand and you really realize that there's not even 5 million people here, and I think there's 6 million sheep. There's like ridiculous numbers where there's like 10 million cows and 5 million people or 10 million sheep. And you realize that there's not a big culture of design. No matter how designers want to think that there's a history of design, but there's not a big, it's not called, if you've ever been to Scandinavia, like Scandinavia has a culture of design. The UK has a culture of design, but sort of more so engineering, like it's an engineering culture also of, you know, the Industrial Revolution. The US has its own culture of architecture and history and people like Raymond Loewy, things like that. The Italians, blah, 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 blah. And you don't really have that so much in New Zealand, and you have an economy that revolves around agriculture and tourism. So agriculture is really important, food's really important. But outside of those cultural centres like Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch, Dunedin, Taranaki and New Plymouth, you know, there's pockets of creativity, but there's not the huge cultural history. Obviously for Maori, there's a huge cultural history of design and all sorts of innovation, from sort of navigation, art, sculpture. There's all sorts of things like that, but not so much from that sort of Western view. That's how I perceive it anyway. So then when I came here, it was really about forging my own path, which started in academia, and then I started the first Fab Lab, like digital fabrication facility with MIT in Boston. Did that in like 2012, which was a super cool experience. And then out of that, I went and worked in government, moved into more service design work, and all through that, I've just really, I always want to work with the best people. So like trying to find people who are really good at what they do, try and share knowledge with people, try and build communities. So I did the Fab Lab stuff, which started that digital fabrication community here in Wellington, and around New Zealand, or kickstarted some of it anyway. I did the first Internet of Things meetup in New Zealand, which started to build that community. I've done other like workshop things and experiential learning for designers that have helped build community, and then I've contributed to those communities also. So I talk at conferences and talk at events, things like that. So through that, and also working on some good projects that have been like working on the New Zealand immigration project, where I sort of led the research with my colleague Charlene Teray and Chiara Monteleone. Though those projects start to they win awards, so people see the work, and then they see you as part of that team. So it's always been a process of surrounding yourself with good people, building community and helping that community, and hopefully being part of projects that then are good projects. So producing good work has always been a really big thing for me, and I've always done that. Now I've always created my own projects. So I've always, ever since I left university, I've always hustled, and hustled not in that negative connotation of like ripping people off, but hustled as in I'm looking for opportunities. Where's the next? What do I think people should be doing? Where is there a gap that people aren't doing this, should be doing that, and how can we make that a reality, or how can we enter this competition to do something? So it's always I've always tried to make good things happen, and that's really how my career's evolved. That's the arc of it, from being in New Zealand, from being in the UK, doing exactly the same things, working with good people, creating good projects, building community, right through to New Zealand, doing exactly the same things, like moving through digital fabrication and sort of democratization of design, strategic design experience, through to sort of Foresight Futures work, which again, when you look at the arc of that in terms of our practice, they are the three things that we try and sort of sew together.
And so you talked about the community, but how is it actually the experience of like selling those ideas? And by selling, I'm not just talking about like going to the market and sell your projects, but how is it like to convince people that this is what you need? These are the practices of like, okay, service design. So immigration in New Zealand, you need service design because people are coming to your country from other countries. They have different cultures. They may not understand the world the way you do, and on and on. How was that experience?
I think we've been really lucky in New Zealand in terms of the government have been doing human-centered design since like 2007. Early examples in the tax department go back to sort of 2007. So there's a good appetite and awareness of the value of human-centered design practices. So, but it's always challenging selling something new. And I was talking about this yesterday, that everyone wants the thing that they've seen someone else get. So everyone wants the personas, or everyone wants the journey maps, or everyone wants things that they see everyone else get, so they feel safe that they're paying for these things, which is a big challenge when, so that's a big challenge when what we're trying to do as a practice is we're always trying to break the mold. So we're always trying to create new tools, new methodologies, new approaches to what we do. We're never just trying to sell like the cookie cutter, we always do design thinking, or we always do these things. We don't. We tailor everything, and we're experimenting all the time on what we're trying to do next. And that's really hard to sell people, because you're asking them to invest in an organization that's not, it's relatively new, and you know, people are still getting their head around what we do, but also they don't want to buy uncertainty. They want to buy certainty. This is what people buy. So this is why when you do a sort of project request or whatever it is, request for proposal, they want the solution. They want you to tell them what the solution is. Whereas we say, well, we can't tell you what the solution is because we're working in complexity and we're working in a really emergent way. And this stuff will emerge as we go. We have a framework of what we do, but we can't necessarily tell you what the solution is. So it's really, it's really challenging, Pouyan. It's not an easy thing to do. But it comes back to building those relationships with people and building that trust. And it also comes back to what I was saying before of trying to put some speculative things out into the world so people can start to understand what we do more. And hopefully providing a point of view that other people don't. So we talk about things that aren't always popular, and we do things that aren't always popular, and not everyone will like them, but hopefully the people that do are the people that want to work with us and do something new.
Yeah. So Chris, we're actually running out of time. I just want to ask one more question from you.
No problem.
So the practice of a speculative design and service design and all of those things that we're talking about, those are going to change in the, let's say, post-COVID-19 world.
Yeah.
And we see like more people. So this is the new trend of people wanting to know again the future. So you have this big market of like everyone wants to know. So what is the future? What is going to be the future of my work? What's going to be the future of my like love life, my social life, everything. But they don't quite know what we are offering. So how do you think we can in this new era, in this new emerging era, how can we start to like kind of probably should we go to educate people about futures? Should we, I don't know, what should we do to find our own portion of this market, of this new thing that is coming up? How would this affect our practice?
I think there's 2 or 3 things there. I think one thing that you would relate to, and one thing that you'd be excited about, is actually telling people stories, like telling the stories of the work, the projects, how things work, but also talking about outcomes and impact, because people don't just pay you to tell a nice story. They want outcomes. They want to understand what the things that you created did for the organization. But also that means you have to think more broadly about the impact of your work and what it is. And you have to think about a lot of soft metrics and measurement. And it's not just about the hard numbers of we did these things and got X amount of whatever it was. You have to talk about the internal changes within a team or within the organization, and how they started to think differently, or, you know, of how they ran all these experiments from this work that we did, and it actually created this service down the line, and it was like 18 months later, but it actually came from the work that we did, because that's what people want. They don't just want the stories or the things. They want to say, or they want to know, well, what is the change that you created by doing this work? And I think one of the challenges for futures work and foresight work is it can feel quite fluffy, and it can feel quite intangible, and it can be quite easy for people to dismiss it, because they can say, but that's like 10 years out and that never happened. So actually creating some good rigor around your work, and the story of you can show people, well, actually, if you look at this and then this step, this step, this step, and then suddenly we're there, and it only takes these things to happen. I think people are going to be suddenly people are more primed to think and accept these new ideas. They understand that I think people are living through a period where there's been a shock, there's been a huge shock to the system. And, you know, we said to our client, we have a client at the moment, we're doing some scenario work for them. We came back, we did some environmental scanning before Christmas, came back. We were getting ready to do some scenarios at the start of April, and we had a conversation with them after we presented some work, and we said to them, if we'd have said to you before Christmas, there's going to be a global pandemic, the world's going to shut, there'll be no tourism to New Zealand, you know, we'll lose 40% of our economy. Queenstown will go to one of the poorest parts of New Zealand. You know, there'll be thousands of deaths in every country. You wouldn't have believed us. You'd have just laughed us out of a room, and you'd have said what we're thinking about is ridiculous. But the point of doing futures work, like if you think about Jim Data's second law of the futures,
to appear to be ridiculous.
Any idea about the future should at first appear ridiculous. You know, our job is to think the unthinkable, as we say here, to sort of steal the words of Matt Kavanagh. We should be thinking the unthinkable, because by thinking the unthinkable, we can start to think about what we do, and even if it never happens, something similar might happen. You know, that I read something today that all the countries who were more prepared for climate change have been more prepared for COVID-19. So even though it's nothing necessarily exactly the same, if you're preparing and planning and thinking about things, then you're better equipped to think about things that might just pop up out of nowhere. So I think telling that story and actually communicating to people that you do need to think the unthinkable, to think about the future, you need to think imaginatively and creatively, and we have a bunch of tools and skills that can help you do that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Chris. We're actually running out of time.
Cool.
Thank you so much. It was my honor to talk to you tonight, for you today, for me. So, some of our folks, some of our audience have some questions. I guess we will collect those questions. We will turn them to English. I will probably send them to you and then receive your answers for them. Probably that would be a better way of handling the thing. You think so?
Perfect. Yeah,
Amazing.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much for your time. I guess it's very close to midnight there. I wish you
something like that. Yeah. Something like that. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Namihi nui. Have a lovely evening. Ka kite ano.
Thank you so much, Chris. Have a good night. Bye-bye.